Afterlife of Alanna Miller. Book 3 in the Nightmares Trilogy. Written by Demelza Carlton. Autonarrated by AI Charlotte from Google. 56. My sister was an angry, unruly child, but she was my father's favorite. He never believed a word of what my brothers and I told him of her behavior. No toy pet or servant was safe around her, but he said his sweet water lily, for that is what Lillipah means, would never harm anything. I knew better. When war broke out and Fatima's family fled, of course my father offered to let her stay in our house in Riyadh. I was delighted to see her again, for she was my favorite cousin. Like me, Fatima wanted to see the world. The furthest she'd ever traveled from home was Egypt to see the pyramids and the other ruins there, but she wanted so much more. She was thrilled for me that I'd be studying in France, and she made me promise to visit her in Australia. She'd fallen in love with an Englishman, and she and her daughters were going to live with her husband in Australia. She could talk of nothing else, she was so happy. And even when she went into labor with you, she was excited. In pain and still smiling. Mosen shook his head. I thought about asking what my mother had to do with his sister, but I pressed my lips together and stayed silent. And one day she came to me with a smile that seemed less than happy, saying she was worried about my sister. Her room was next to Lulu's and she'd heard sounds like the girl was in pain, so she'd gone in to investigate and found Lulu with one of the servants. A naked man. Knowing the dishonor Lulu could bring on herself and her family, Fatima had come to me, so that I could tell my father. I did, but it was hard. He didn't believe me at first, but I managed to persuade him that even if Lulu didn't mean to do it, she was in danger of seducing our staff, and she needed a husband. I truly thought it would help. I left for Paris, and Fatima made you wave your little hand at me, insisting that she would see me in Australia before the year was out. I never saw her alive again. Her funeral was strained. Your father's grief is still fresh after 20 years, so I didn't want to burden him, but the atmosphere was angry. And my father's house was worse. Her father accused mine of treachery in allowing Fatima to be murdered beneath his roof, while my father insisted she'd killed herself. I knew Fatima better than anyone, and she would never have killed herself. She had too much to live for. So I swore vengeance on her murderer because she deserved to see justice. And so did you, her orphan daughter. I blinked, delighted by the distraction offered by a waitress with my coffee and what looked like enough food for a small army. What is that? Mosen waved at the tiered plates a waitress hoisted onto the table. High tea. It's an English custom, I'm told. Isn't this what you normally have at this time of the afternoon? I burst out laughing. No. Maybe the Queen of England does, and maybe people did 100 years ago, but I've never eaten something called high tea in my life. Then it's a first for both of us, cousin. His practiced smile returned as we both listened to the waitress' explanation of how to eat a high tea. I sipped my coffee as he took a tart and placed the whole thing in his mouth. I watched as he struggled to chew the thick crusty pastry before I asked, so who killed her? I'm pretty sure it wasn't me. He almost choked on his tart, trying to swallow it whole so he could answer, but he resigned himself to chewing it while keeping his annoyed gaze on me. Evidently he could have spun his rambling tale all afternoon. I selected a quiche and nibbled at it, careful not to make his mistake. Lulu did it, I'm certain of it. She said she found Fatima with a knife through her chest, but my sister always liked playing with knives. Mosen took a large mouthful of tea, seemingly oblivious to the heat. But at the time I was too shocked at Fatima's death to realize it. My sister was soon married to the poor man my father had selected for her, and I returned to university. As you probably already know, Fatima's father took responsibility for you and her two younger sisters, probably spoiled you as much as he did. I don't know. I kept to my studies until I graduated and returned home. My father needed a trusted executive to look after his business interests, and I was only too happy to help. Our businesses prospered under my care for some time until my sister's husband died very suddenly. Suicide, I was told. My father's health suffered and I found myself doing both his job and mine. Lulu moved back into our house and my father teetered between anger and despair. He didn't let her leave the house for her entire mourning period, when he announced he'd found a new husband for her. She screeched that she wouldn't have him and she'd kill him too, and it occurred to me that perhaps the man had preempted her attack by ending his own life. Then I started wondering about other supposed suicides. I nodded impatiently, waiting for him to get to the point. My coffee was almost gone. My father shipped her off with her new husband to Australia and I forgot about her. His health continued to suffer and my duties only increased. When he died, 7 years ago now, I discovered that there were several substantial drains on our profits, and I sought to weed these out. One was a sequence of regular transfers to a mysterious foreign account that I had no knowledge of, while others turned out to be political causes he'd supported. Some might call the groups terrorists perhaps. Bad for business was all I knew, as there was a pair of investment advisors who were trumpeting this message at every forum they could find. Australians too, which I wondered about. I stopped all of the payments to accounts I didn't recognize, and waited to see the result. The first contact was a screeching phone call from Lulu. She wanted to know why her allowance had been cut off. The foreign account was hers. My father had been paying her an allowance for living in Australia, so far from her family. That's why she'd consented to the marriage. He'd bribed her and sent her out of the country where no one knew she'd murdered her husband or her cousin. I told her that there had been a reduction in profits due to bad investments my father had made into terrorist groups, which I'd realized thanks to the Australian couple, so she would have to find her own source of income. Perhaps even find a job. She threatened to come home, but I said I'd tell the police here about the people she'd killed. So she swore she'd sort it out herself. He poured another cup of tea from his little pot. It wasn't until several months later, when Australian security agents started to make inquiries about my business, that I realized Lulu had actually done something. Killed a girl I understood and tried to kill another, you. I recognized you immediately, you do look like Fatima. This news was quickly followed by the report of my sister's death, and that of her husband. I tracked down the reports to one security agent, who she'd corrupted. If he provided me with information and maintained his position in the security agency, I'd continue to support him financially, as long as he ensured my family's name wasn't dishonored. My sister was crazy and she'd done terrible things, but the Australian justice system couldn't do anything to her after her death. I insisted he give me all the details he had on your whereabouts so that I could find you, but no one else could. His stare was almost imperious, as if he was daring me to complain. You stole records about my name and address changes, all about me being placed in witness protection, but you didn't make a move all this time? Why now? My question seemed to surprise him. The agent was about to lose his job and he faced an inquiry, when he might reveal everything. I arranged his suicide and he told me about my sister's death, attempting to get me to go after you out of vengeance. My mouth went dry. And you have. Here we are. Will I get to finish my strawberry tart before you decide you want to end this? I stabbed my fork into a syrupy strawberry and lifted it to my lips. He stared at me. I don't understand. He told me you'd killed my sister, quite inventively too. A fitting, painful end for the woman who murdered your mother and tried to do the same to you. You are Kayana, a true force of nature, as your mother named you. I'm in your debt because you did what I swore I'd do. He wiped his lips with a napkin. I offer you her house, her dowry, and anything else you want of me. I will pay for personal bodyguards for you, for the rest of your life if you wish. Or I will set you up in a palace of your own at home if you don't want to live in this country any longer." For the first time this polished man seemed uncertain and sincere. I swallowed. "I don't want or need any of those things. I'll accept the house here, but only because of what happened there. I think I need to visit the place again, maybe more than once, before I can properly come to terms with what your sister, my cousin, did to me there. The rest, Mosen, I just want to live a normal life, like any other Australian. No servants, no bodyguards, no dowry or allowances, I don't need it. I'm a doctor, my income is enough, and I'll never lack for a job. I want the security of knowing that no one will come seeking retribution. Not from me, and not from the Australian couple's family. I want the Millers left alone, all of the ones who are left." He grinned fiercely. "I will make sure it is known. Neither your family or the other one is to be touched, or they will answer to me." For a moment I shivered. Laura had been crazy, but this man was chillingly sane. And when he said that, I could imagine a world of pain for anyone who disobeyed his orders. But he was my cousin, and he owed me. I matched his grin. "You do that. And when I die of old age, I'll consider your debt paid." His smile turned indulgent. "You speak confidently, yet you're defenseless. I have 2 bodyguards waiting outside and at my signal." I pressed my taser to his groin under the table. "They can come and collect your stunned body while I leave unharmed. Your sister taught me never to be defenseless, and I carry the knife she tried to kill me with as a reminder. I am my mother's daughter, but I'm related to you too." His wide eyes weren't smiling anymore. "Kiana." I pulled the taser away. "Yes. I have many names, but you can call me that. Thank you for what you've told me, for everything you've done, and for your actions in the future too. It's good to have family who will look out for you. If you're ever in Perth again, we could have high tea." I picked up my strawberry tart and walked out of the cafe, happily headed for the train station and home. Hoping I wouldn't crumple into a little relieved puddle on the train carpet, when it finally hit me that Laura's brother wasn't going to kill me, and he'd kill anyone who tried to. And Nathan, both he and his family were safe. 57. I trudged up the steps to my apartment, feeling more exhausted with every flight of stairs. Politics and difficult negotiations and risking my life, who knew they'd be so tiring? Good thing I didn't hanker to the next female James Bond. As I reached the top level, I stopped in horror. While I'd been in the cafe with Mosen, someone had left a corpse on my doorstep. The timing was too good for it to be a coincidence. If this was a message from my cousin that he wouldn't pay his imaginary debt to me, then I was going to. "Angel? Oh, thank God you're home," the corpse mumbled, rolling over to reveal Nathan's bleary-eyed face. My heart started beating again. "Nathan? What are you doing, sleeping on my doormat? I gave you keys weeks ago, when you were staying here. And you climbed 6 flights of stairs with your cast? You shouldn't do that." I dropped to my knees to help him up, my knees almost buckling under his weight as I struggled to unlock the door. Somehow we managed to get him inside and onto my couch, before I put my bag away. "Where were you?" he asked. "You remember how my mother's cousin wanted to meet with me about the transfer of the house? That was today," I admitted, not willing to look at him. He lurched to his feet. "You still went? Alone? You could have been killed." I smiled weakly. "Yeah, I could have. I didn't know that he was Laura's brother. Turns out he knew she was crazy, but his father sent her here so she wouldn't kill anyone back home. He was grateful that I'd solved his dilemma over what to do with her, actually. Even offered me money. For a minute there, I seriously thought about a career as an assassin." Nathan's eyes widened. Angel, I know you're good, but please, I'd never sleep again if I knew you were out killing people every night, and that one night you might not come back. Come back? You mean you want to stay with me again? Is that why you climbed all those stairs against your doctor's orders? I thought we agreed that you'd be better off at your place with no steps. He stared at his feet. Yeah, but bumping up and down 6 flights of stairs on my bum is better than spending another day in that house with Chris. She carps at me constantly over everything I do. I can't believe I considered hurting you to save her. It's like my punishment for saving her life is to want to kill her myself for the rest of my life. I folded my arms. So you're saying that I should take you in to save the life of a girl who called me all sorts of uncomplimentary names, tried to keep us apart by lying to me, and generally tries to make your life hell? I owed her nothing. Less than nothing, seeing as I'd already given far too much for Nathan's bitch of a sister. Nathan's eyes were hard when they met mine. No. I'm asking you to take me in so I don't commit murder and go to prison for it. I'll pay rent and I know how to vacuum and clean the toilet. I didn't want to know what that meant, but it'd be a relief to have someone else home. Not so lonely anymore. All right, you can stay, I relented. But keep my vacuum cleaner out of the toilet. Toilet brush only. 58. So what do you plan to do next? Caitlin picked delicately at her chicken salad, managing to skewer a piece of lettuce perfectly before transferring it to her mouth without a drop of dressing landing outside her lips. I shrugged. First, I'm going to rest and let this broken leg heal. As soon as I'm out of the cast, I'll be back at work, breaking up drunken brawls and chasing away graffiti artists in between events. I considered the event lineup for the next few weeks. Hey, I think this'll get me out of the Wiggles concerts this year. It's worth breaking my leg just for that. I can't stand all those crazy parents. I took a huge bite of my burger, showering crumbs everywhere. Shit, Caitlin must have thought I was some sort of barbarian. I tried to gather up some of the mess and put it back on my plate. She swallowed a morsel of chicken and sipped her drink. There's more to life than working security at events. Look, I'm sure it's paid the bills, but you were only a year off finishing a degree in medicine. You could still go back to university, finish the course, and be working in a hospital the following year. Wouldn't Alanna have wanted you to finish your degree and do more than work security all your life? Yes. God, how did I tell her that without revealing that some of my nightmares were back at uni in the necropsy labs? The last day I saw Alanna too? I tried going back. I enrolled and went to class and everything was fine until we had a lab and I couldn't. I choked up and couldn't continue. Instead, I bit into my burger. Cadavers? After having to identify Alanna in the morgue, that must have been really hard for you. I nodded, chewing slowly in the hope that she'd change the subject before I could swallow. It's been almost 6 years though. Do you think if you went back now, you might be able to? She trailed off as she saw how adamantly I shook my head. Not a hope in hell. If anything, it'd be worse now. Caitlin nodded as if she understood, intent on fishing the last few pieces of chicken from her bowl. You know, there are other courses you could do instead. Ones that don't involve cadaver dissection, but that'll give you credit for what you've already done. Nursing. Biology. Biomedical science. Psychology. Even physiotherapy. What? I couldn't seem to close my mouth. A different course? Why hadn't I thought of that? Physiotherapy. It's the reason I recovered as fast as I did 5 years ago. Working with an experienced physio, and religiously doing the exercises she gave me. They deal with injuries but also pregnancy-related stuff. If you ran one of the physio sessions on Core Fitness, you'd have every nubile woman in the class lusting after you. The male physios get way more interest than the female instructors. A bit sexist, but when you see some of those guys in their gym gear. My mind was too busy exploding with the possibilities of what I could study next for me to even summon up some jealousy at the thought of Caitlin checking out the men she worked with. Shit, if I could transfer courses, the man she checked out might be me. I'll look into it first thing tomorrow, I swore. She managed to smile. You don't have to if you don't want to, Nathan. It was just a suggestion. I mean, a job's a job. If you're happy doing security, it's none of my business. I just thought. I grabbed her and kissed her. She was too stunned to resist, and by the time she'd recovered, I'd already let go. I laughed freely for the first time in what felt like years. You're an angel. You really are an angel, you know that? I only thought of medicine, that if I couldn't be a doctor, then there was no point in going back. Chalk it up to 4 wasted years. But if I can use that, and finish a degree, get a job as a graduate, shit Angel, I'll owe you my first paycheck. Dinner in the most expensive restaurant in the city. You'll have to tell me which one that is though, because I can't afford it on a security guard's salary. Caitlin covered her cheeks as if she was trying to hide her blush. I wished I'd kissed her with more passion. She deserved it. My laptop's in the spare room, the one I'm using as a study. You can use it while I'm at work tomorrow if you like. I shrugged. I brought my one, but I had to leave it in the car with all my stuff. Hauling my own ass up here was hard enough. I'm not sure I'd have managed it with a bag. So you're up here without even a toothbrush? I might be able to carry your bags up, but I'd prefer to wait until morning when I can ask someone to help me. Caitlin looked torn. The stalker will be down there. I didn't see him at all down south, but last night I saw someone lurking in the car park as I headed up the stairs. I don't know if my cousins called him off or if he works for someone else entirely. Shit, the stalker. I'd forgotten about him. I'd meant to accost him and make him tell me why he was following Caitlin around, before making sure he left her alone. With my broken leg, I'd be bloody useless, no threat to him at all. Caitlin didn't deserve to live like this. I can wait till morning. Honest. I left my toothbrush in your bathroom last time anyway. I guess I was hoping you might let me come over again. 59. I pulled on my shorts and wandered to the bathroom, hoping that I might wake up more thoroughly if I splashed some water on my face. I'd shared a glass of whiskey with Caitlin last night, which had dulled the pain a bit, but this morning it was back with a vengeance. Enough to make me want to slide down the stairs on my bum to go get the pain pills from my car. Maybe if I asked Caitlin nicely enough, she'd take pity on me and... Good morning, Nathan. This is Jake, he lives in one of the ground floor apartments and you now owe him a case of beer. I blinked. Caitlin grinned and the man she called Jake stuck his hand out. When I shook it, he said, I was just helping Dr. Miller here bring some bags up. This is the first I've heard about beer though. He stared at my cast. Now I know why you can't carry your own stuff. How the hell did you get up here in the first place with that? Slowly and painfully. Thanks, mate. I was ready to offer her a lifetime of servitude if she'd bring my bags up. Beer's probably easier. What sort of beer do you want? Jake snorted. I prefer to eat bread, not drink it. I'm more of a whiskey man myself. He eyed my bags. Well, you're welcome, I guess. But after I've spent all day sorting out the world's IT problems, one server at a time, I don't think I'll care much. You obey your doctor's orders. I'll arrange something after work. Thanks again, Jake, Caitlin called after him as he disappeared down the stairs. I raised my eyebrows. You got your IT guy to bring up my bags? Caitlin laughed. Not my IT guy. He does systems for huge companies. If the hospital system went down, they'd call someone like Jake. And he volunteered to help me. He spotted me pulling your stuff out of the boot of your car, took pity on me and decided to be gallant. I think I might have an unopened bottle of cognac in the cupboard. I'll drop it on his doorstep on my way to work. And you," her tone softened as she smiled, "you take care of yourself. Don't injure that leg any more than you already have. I'll be back around dinner time. Help yourself to whatever you want from the kitchen. If you need me for anything, send a text message to my phone. I'll get back to you on my lunch break." She pulled her jacket on, kissed me so swiftly I didn't have a chance to reciprocate, and closed the door behind her. Deciding a shower would be better than trying to follow her down the stairs for another kiss, I rifled through my bags for some clean clothes and limped back to the bathroom. It wasn't until I spotted the plastic bag in my wet pack that I remembered the dire threats of what would happen if I showered my splintered leg. I was supposed to bag the whole thing up like crime scene evidence. Shit. I should have asked Caitlin for help before she left. Maybe the bath. A glimpse of white caught my eye and I looked more closely at the shower cubicle. One of Caitlin's plastic chairs sat in it, facing the door, with a second one shrouded in the shower curtain. I laughed softly. She'd already considered my problem and solved it without a second thought. Shoving the shower curtain open, I saw a note on one of the chairs. "Don't get your cast wet. See." Showering with only one good leg was a nightmare, but thanks to Caitlin's forethought, at least it was bearable. She'd even left towels within easy reach. I could have kissed her, but she was busy at work, seeing to some other lucky patient. When she got home, I promised myself. I decided to give shaving a miss, despite the itchy stubble, so I dressed and limped to the kitchen to hunt up some breakfast. I wished for a croissant and the sumptuous cooked breakfast from the guest house, but toast and Vegemite was the best I could find. At least it was better than the hospital fare, a cold, pale, floury mush that was marketed as scrambled eggs. I'd seriously contemplated eating cornflakes again. Easing a couple of chairs out, I propped my useless leg up on one and sat on the other while I waited for my laptop to boot. Back to uni next year. Shit, I'd be an old man compared to the other undergrads. Alanna would be pleased, the female students would finally be safe from me. I'd be over 30 by the time I graduated. Better late than never. And maybe, just maybe, I could earn enough of Caitlin's respect back, so that she'd consider me as more than a patient. I'd never deserve her, but there was always the faint hope that she'd be willing to settle for less. It'd mean telling her everything. I knew that, and I wasn't anywhere near ready for it. If she knew that I'd seriously considered raping her, she'd run screaming, and rightly so. No. I could never tell her. Everything else maybe, but not that. That one little secret wouldn't place her in any more danger. I knew I'd die before I'd hurt her again. Or let anyone else hurt her. Maybe I should study criminology and counter-terrorism instead. Now there was a crazy idea. Shaking my head, I clicked on my favorite browser, only to get an error message telling me I wasn't connected to the internet. It took me 10 minutes of swaying at my laptop and changing the settings before I realized that I wasn't at home. And Caitlin's Wi-Fi was asking for a password that I didn't have. I tried guessing, but when my first 2 attempts failed dismally, I decided I'd be better off just asking Caitlin. I checked my watch. Lunchtime was hours away and I was itching to start planning my future. Maybe her password was as simple as the random code on the bottom of the modem, like ours was. I figured it couldn't hurt. I remembered her mentioning the spare bedroom where I'd seen a desk last time I stayed, so that was my first guess. Sure enough, there was a modem, but there were half a dozen different alphanumeric codes to choose from. With only one try left, I wasn't game to gamble. Sighing, I set the modem back on the desk beside Caitlin's laptop. I wonder. She had given me permission to use it last night, I reasoned, and I was only searching the internet, not raiding her encrypted files for her deepest, darkest secrets. Besides, I probably knew them anyway, as the darkest thing in her past was surely me and all that I was responsible for. I pressed the power button and waited, finding it funny that Caitlin had the same laptop as I did. Mine was 6 years old and definitely the worse for wear, but hers looked in much better shape. Newer, I guessed, given she could afford it. I started with criminology, but just the thought of forensics put me off. Shit, there were so many options. 5 universities in this state alone, plus plenty in the eastern states and overseas. With Caitlin here though, I didn't want to be too far away from her. I'd missed her too much. That still left me heaps to choose from, and pages of information to scroll through. Considering everything that piqued my interest, I slowly read through the results before rejecting the options that would take too long, not get me a job, or just weren't me. Biology degrees looked boring, chasing after animals or spending hours on my knees, looking at plants or puddles or things that were too small to see. Microbiology, shit, I'd go crazy cooped up in a lab. If the other staff didn't go insane first, from having to work in a confined space with me. Pharmacy, far too tempting. Despite the number of sleeping pills I took just to sleep, I wasn't addicted to anything yet, but if I had access to that sort of supply, I'd be bound to try self-medicating, and that could only end badly. Psychology was bad for 2 reasons. It'd take years longer than anything else, and I didn't really want to know the technical names for what was wrong with me. Gradually, I realized that the only options I wasn't ruling out were physiotherapy courses. Caitlin was right, it was perfect for me. I clicked on the course requirements, tapping my fingers on the desk as I waited for the page to load. My stomach gave a fierce growl and I glanced at my watch, wondering if it was time for lunch yet. A second check at the time on the laptop told me the watch was accurate, and it was nearly 2 in the afternoon. A few hours and Caitlin would be home, and I could kiss her for providing me with the perfect solution for my future. But first, lunch. I made myself a sandwich and ate it by the window that overlooked the hospital where Caitlin worked. Maybe we could meet up for lunch sometimes if we worked together. Maybe. I should contact the course coordinator and the admissions office to find out what I'd have to do in order to start studying physiotherapy next year. I shoved the last bite of lunch into my mouth and returned to the laptop. Yep, there were the numbers. I pulled my phone out of my pocket and swiped the screen. Nothing. I tried again. Nope. I pressed the power button, watching the screen slowly glow into life before it flashed a low battery warning and blinked off. It shouldn't have been such a surprise. I couldn't remember the last time I'd charged it. Maybe before Caitlin had called an ambulance to pull me out of that godforsaken hole in the ground. No wonder the battery was flat. I laid the useless phone on the desk and decided to email them instead. Clicking on the email address opened up my email program, which always took a while to load as it checked for fresh messages. I sat back to wait, scanning the screen for all the unopened emails I'd received while I was in hospital. Advertising for products I didn't need, surely, and maybe a few I might want. Nothing came up. Not a single ad. I peered at the last read email on the list and my heart froze. The subject was Alanna Miller and the sender, shit, the sender was me. My hand shook as I opened it. And the next one. And the one after that. There was a whole list of them, all opened. Every single one was full of my inane ramblings in the middle of the night, as I'd written my emails to the only person I could confide in, Alanna, the sister I'd never see again. As I read and reread the words, remembering the descent into darkness each one represented, it slowly dawned on me that there were worse things than my nightmares. The emails had been opened and read. On this laptop. Alanna's old laptop. In Caitlin's apartment. She knew. 60. I trotted eagerly up the last few stairs, relieved to be home and looking forward to spending an evening with Nathan. I'd been lonely for too long, but it was more than that too. We fit. Whatever was wrong with us, we'd fix it together, or at least we'd try to. And there'd be no one else coming after us, ever. Well, except maybe Jake if he didn't like cognac. I glanced down and the bottle was gone from his doormat, so presumably he or his girlfriend had accepted my thank you gift. Maybe Nathan and I could have some of the top-shelf whiskey in the liquor cabinet tonight. I unlocked the door and pushed it open. "Nathan?" I called. "I hope you don't mind, I brought pizza. After the day I've had, I don't want to cook, and there's this specialty pizza place up the road that does the best pizzas, so I asked for their signature one for you. It looks better than mine, and that's saying something." The whole place was dark, he hadn't turned any lights on. Maybe he'd decided to have a nap. "Nathan?" Clicking the light on with my elbow, I crossed to the dining table and set down the pizza boxes. He wasn't in the lounge room, and I could see his made bed in the guest room. My room was empty too, so I tried the spare room next. Nathan was hunched over, his head resting face down on his crossed arms on the desk surface. I reached for his shoulder. "Nathan, are you all right?" He lifted his head and stared at me with bloodshot eyes. "You knew," he whispered, then staggered to his feet, backing away from me as if I frightened him. "You fucking knew." My smile faltered, but I forced myself to keep it in place. "Knew what?" Nathan waved at the laptop, then his own head. "Everything. Everything I did. All those times you asked me to tell you about my nightmares and you already knew. You read my emails to Alanna. I wanted you to tell me yourself. To help you recover. It's what she would have done." He strode forward and ripped the name badge off my shirt. "You're not her. You're not." Tears streamed down his cheeks, confirming my suspicions as to why his eyes were so red. "Why did you take her name, of all the ones you could have used?" I didn't have a choice. It was one of Mott's sick jokes. At first I wanted to change it, but as time wore on, I realized it wasn't an insult but an honor. She was a better person than I was, and she would have made a better doctor than I am. She wouldn't have run away to Melbourne when you needed her. She'd have fought for you. I bet she did fight for you to her very last breath. And I wish they'd taken me first and that she'd been the one to survive, because you'd tell her what was hurting you and why, and you'd let her help you instead of shutting her out the way you do to me. I wiped the tears from my face. Anger and grief had no place here tonight. I needed to stay calm if I wanted to help him. "You didn't know her." His voice sounded dead, lifeless, devoid of all feeling. "How would you know anything about what she was like? You never met her. And she wasn't stronger than you. You survived and she didn't." I swiped the touchpad on the laptop and the screen burst into life. A few taps opened the last email his sister had ever sent. The one about him and me. I survived because I had her brother to be my hero, to save me from his sister's fate. I survived because of her sacrifice. And I did know her, Nathan. She told me I'd be perfect for you, and she wanted to be the one to introduce us. I guess in her own way, she did. Even in death, she was looking after you. I pointed at the screen. "Read it." Nathan's eyes darted suspiciously from me to the laptop, before he capitulated. I stood silent while I waited for Alanna's words to sink in. "You're trying to tell me that was you?" If anything, his suspicion had deepened. I wet my lips. I got there early. I was the only one in the lecture theater and she mustn't have seen me, because she raced through her whole presentation with her eyes closed. When she opened them, then she saw me. We talked for a few minutes and she asked me why I wanted to study medicine. I remember the words because I used them myself plenty of times. One day I could save someone's life and that will make it all worth it. And she said I sounded just like her. Then she mentioned you and your reputation. Laughter bubbled up. I didn't think you were my type. I closed my eyes. And on the beach, when you told me your name, all the pieces fitted together. I knew your sister and I knew who you were, and I believed you'd gotten mixed up in something that wasn't of your making. And I trusted you." He couldn't seem to get the words out. "You trusted me? You knew me and her and what I did. My worst, my darkest?" I nodded. "You should have left me in that pit to die." "No. You're not one of those bastards, Nathan. If you were, I would have killed you a long time ago. I made that decision in hospital and I've never regretted it. Alanna was right, and I bet whatever afterlife she's in now, she's enjoying watching us as the longest-running soap opera she's ever seen. She wouldn't begrudge you happiness without her, Nathan, and I agree with her. You saved my life and you'll never hurt me." I needed to touch him, to reassure him and maybe myself too. My eyes never leaving his, I closed the distance between us and kissed him, wrapping my arms tightly around his neck so he couldn't pry me free. He didn't respond and I pulled back. "Yes, I've seen the darkest depths of your soul. And they're not as fucking dark as you think, Nathan. I wouldn't love you the way I do if they were. Do you hear me? I love you, Nathan." His eyes blazed, but I didn't fear him. "Never, Nathan." I stood my ground as he reached for me, grasping my already ripped shirt and tearing it further until it slipped to the floor, ruined. "Angel," he said hoarsely, his gaze lifting from my breast to my face. His kiss was sudden and fierce, inflaming my passion even as it fueled his. He backed me up against the window, his body a rigid wall of muscle pinning me in place. No softness at all, especially not where it counted. I fumbled to undo his pants to free him, but he grabbed my hands and pressed them to the glass above my head. "No. You first, Angel." His hand slipped into my pants and I cried out as his fingers expertly found their target. My legs turned to jelly, so it was only his hold keeping me upright. Nothing could stop us now, not that I wanted him to. Release the girl and back away slowly, hands in the air. Fuck. 61. I raised my hands and slowly turned around, trying to keep my body between Caitlin and the dickhead who decided to interrupt us. Caitlin and I were doomed. Fate hated us, and if I even got close to a chance of happiness, it was shot to hell by yet another bastard like this one. Fuck, he was even wearing a balaclava. "Step away from the girl," he repeated, his voice slightly muffled by the mask. Reluctantly, I took a step closer to him. A flash of silver sailed past me and thunked into the door frame behind him. We both stared at the knife pinning his shirt to the wall, and he reached up to touch the blood welling up from where it had grazed his arm. Balaclava bastard raised shaking hands and I realized he was unarmed. What kind of idiot burst into a house and tried to break up a busy couple without a weapon? Even I was a match for him with my broken leg, if I could tackle him to the floor. I limped toward him. I was going to punch his fucking lights out. He let out an agonized wail as his body grew rigid, shaking a little as I noticed the fine wires snaking into his shirt. His eyes rolled up and he slid down the wall, his weight pulling Caitlin's knife free to clatter to the floor before he hit it like a sack of potatoes. Caitlin darted in and kicked the knife out of his reach, but it wasn't necessary. He slumped over, unconscious. She nudged his thigh a couple of times but he didn't respond, so she knelt beside him and yanked out the hooks that had anchored the taser to his chest. She took a moment to examine his arm too before she rose. "Watch him," she said grimly, wiping her knife on his shirt before tucking it back into the sheath strapped to her arm. "I'm going to get something we can restrain him with." Restraints? Oh shit. Oh shit. I tried not to think of all the sadistic things that went with restraints. I desperately needed a distraction. Pizza. That was safe. And whiskey maybe. And wondering who the hell this idiot was. I yanked the balaclava off his head and stared at his red face. It was hard to tell, but he looked familiar. If only I could remember where I'd seen him before. Who the hell is he? Caitlin stood in the doorway, staring at the unconscious man. I shrugged. I don't know. I was hoping you would. Never seen him before. Here. She tossed me a roll of electrical tape. Roll his sleeves and his pants legs up. Bind his wrists behind his back, then tape his ankles together. I frowned at the tape. Sticky tape? He'll break out of this in seconds. Caitlin laughed. No, it's heavy-duty electrical tape. This stuff takes off hair and skin. We had a case in Ed a few weeks back where some guy tried to wax his privates with it. Nasty job putting skin grafts there. I shuddered. You mean you want me to put it on bare skin around his wrists and his ankles? Yep. It'll hold him. She glared at the man. And when he wakes up, he can tell us who he is and why the hell he's here in my house. Shouldn't we call the police? I ventured. She considered for a moment. Afterwards. Maybe. If he wants us to. She waited for me to finish taping his wrists before reaching into his pocket. Flipping through his wallet, she pulled out a driver's license. Says his name's Otto. Nope, I don't recognize him. You? Otto. I stared at the man, then the card Caitlin held out. Yeah. I used to work with him. He stopped coming to his shifts and never answered his phone. He was supposed to be working the night of your second concert, but he never turned up. He was a security guard. She rose. That means someone hired him and he'll tell us who if we meet his price. You're going to bribe him for information? I looked around, but Caitlin had left the room. She returned a few minutes later with a stack of towels. No. I'm going to threaten to cut things off until he tells me. She held my horrified stare. What? I'm a doctor. I can stitch things back on. If I want to. I fervently hoped I never pissed her off enough to warrant attention from her knife. Caitlin threw the towels at me. Here, spread these out on the floor under him. To keep the blood off her floorboards? I knew Caitlin could be cold, but this took things a little too far. I'd worked with the bloke. Surely she wouldn't. She upended a pot of water on his face and he came up spluttering. I shoved another towel under his head to mop up the water. Caitlin unsheathed her knife, holding the serrated blade up to the light. Now you're going to tell me why you're here or I'm going to use this. Otto's eyes widened, fixed on the knife. He couldn't seem to get the words out fast enough. He paid me to keep an eye on you. I had to stay in the shadows, out of sight, and make sure nothing happened to you. He said you weren't allowed to know I was there. If you saw me or if you got hurt, I'd lose my job. How long have you been keeping an eye on me? Her voice was dangerously calm. I don't know. Since you started working at the hospital. I watched to make sure you made it home okay and then watched the place at night. Just at night, that's all he wanted. And if you went out, he wanted me to stay watching the apartment. There were a couple of Arab guys who came once or twice watching your place, but they never went in. He said not to interfere unless you were in danger, and they left before you got home, so I stayed in hiding. Her knife stilled. Who's he? Jay. He said his name was Jay. I never met him, we only spoke on the phone. Do you have his number? Otto jerked his head to the side. Pocket. It's in my pocket. Caitlin nodded to me and I extracted his phone, scrolling through the numbers until I found one for Jay. I held it up. Caitlin snorted. Give it to me. She put the phone to her ear. After a few seconds, I heard someone answer. No, it's me, she bit out. And you'd better leave the state tonight, because if I get my hands on you, I'll castrate you for sure this time. You set a fucking stalker on me. After all the trouble I went through, you had someone do surveillance on my house. At night. You know how many nights he followed me home and how many times I nearly attacked him? I can take care of myself. A whiny voice said thinly, I was trying to protect you. Didn't want you to be scared. You should be scared. Next time, run all security through Trevor. And if you send anyone else to my house, especially at night, I'll call the police. She ended the call and threw the phone at Otto's crotch. I winced as it landed. Your job here's done. I don't want to see you near my home or my work again unless you're a genuine patient, Caitlin said. What are you going to do if I tell him to let you go? Get the fuck out of here, Otto replied, looking shaken. He doesn't pay me enough to get stabbed and tortured. Sorry lady, you're on your own. He can shove his job up his ass. Caitlin nodded to me and handed me the knife. Cut him free. Carefully I sawed through the tape on his legs, then his hands. After what she'd said about it ripping off skin, I wasn't game to try it. Caitlin held up her taser. Now get out. Otto winced as he clambered to his feet, but he didn't hesitate. He took off at a run, out the door and down the stairs. Caitlin sagged to the floor with a sigh. God, I hope that means this is over. Cautiously, I wrapped my arms around her. It will be. And if he's crazy enough to come back, I'll be here. I glanced at her ripped shirt. I'm sorry about your shirt. In the heat of the moment and all. She shrugged. It was ripped anyway. I'll buy a new one. She sighed as she rose. I should probably go put some clothes on. After that, I'm not really in the mood anymore. She glanced at my pants, but I didn't have to. I already knew that my libido had left the building. 62. How was your day at work, dear? Nathan fought to keep a straight face as he stirred something in a pot on the stove. I wasn't game to ask what. Exhausting. I hate working with Dr. Proctor. Nathan pulled a beer out of the fridge and handed it to me. Is he a real asshole? I laughed. No, he's a proctologist. Nathan appeared puzzled. But doesn't that mean? I grinned. God, the beer tasted good. Yeah. And he deals with the emergency cases, mostly. I figured my rotation with him would be all about removing appendixes, but the things people stick up there. Nathan burst out laughing. Shit, I forgot about those. I was lucky, but Alanna told me she had to remove goldfish once. Half a dozen of them, and some had been dead for days. Well, in the last week, I've had to deal with a mobile phone, a mouse, some condoms, a tampon, and an electric toothbrush. The last one needed stitches. Nathan winced. Today's one was the worst though. You know that plaster stuff you buy at the hardware store to fill in cracks? He turned pale. No. No one would be that stupid. I nodded. Oh yes, someone was. He'd been fixing up some cracks in the wall with the stuff while renovating his house, and sex toys being expensive and embarrassing to buy, he figured he'd save a bit of money and blushing and make his own. Custom shape and size too. So he got a turkey baster and the plaster and... No. Oh God, no. Nathan shouted, covering his ears. I wished I could cover my imagination just as effectively. The bloke had waited 3 days before he'd worked up the courage to walk stiffly into hospital and whisper to the triage nurse what his problem was. What's for dinner? I finally asked, pointing at the pot. He peered into it. I was thinking pasta, but the water's not boiling yet, so nothing so far. I found some pasta, but I have no idea what to put with it. Everything's pretty empty. He grinned at me sheepishly. What would you like? I shrugged. We could go out. My eyes followed his to his walking cast. Okay, maybe we could get something delivered? And I'll order some groceries and have them delivered tomorrow. I'm sorry, Nathan, I'm not used to taking care of someone who can't leave the house. I don't know how you managed with me 5 years ago. I swear you had to be some sort of saint. I dragged my laptop bag from under the dining table and set it up. All right, let's order some pizza and then you can help me pick out groceries for the next week or so. I buried my head in my hands. I'm sorry. You must think I've had my head up my ass all week. He snorted. Well, no, by the sound of things it wasn't your ass at all. Oh God. Once the helpless laughter started, I couldn't stop. When I paused to catch my breath, Nathan said, I never thought of online shopping. Now you make me feel like an idiot. I should be paying for it too, and rent for taking up space here and using all your electricity and water. No need, honestly. I own the place outright, no rent or mortgage to pay. Paid for by that TV interview we did together years ago, so you don't owe me anything. Food and power and stuff, well, you're not working and you're injured because you were helping me, so room and board are the least I can do for you. I shook my head, attempting to clear it, but it only started to hurt. Tired. I should hire a housekeeper. Nathan limped into the dining room and my chair protested squeakily when he rested his weight on the back of it. I could be your housekeeper while I'm here. I've already met your cleaner and if you show me where you want me to get your food from, I can order it for you. And cook it, I guess, if you tell me what you like and I know how. But if you expect me to wear a uniform or something frilly with a short skirt, stuff it. I don't do dresses. I could hear the hope in his voice. Staying here alone wasn't helping him, with me never home. Nathan needed to do something, not sit around and be useless. I'd be lost without him though. Life was so much brighter with him to come home to. Even if I hadn't slept with him yet. He hadn't mentioned it after the night we'd gotten rid of my stalker. I wanted to, but I was scared I'd hurt his leg worse if we did, and we'd waited 5 years, what was a few weeks more? What about going back to uni? Have you decided that's not what you want? Nathan chuckled. He was standing so close behind me I could feel the vibration through the chair. Actually, I've been talking to Carlton for a few days now. Nothing's official until January, but I've spoken with their admissions office and the head of the physiotherapy school. They've both told me I'm close to qualifying for their graduate degree, with the credits for my unfinished medicine degree, so I'm pretty much guaranteed entry no matter what. If I start in January, I'll be fully qualified within 2 years. Maybe less if I can get credit for some of my anatomy units. His arms slipped around me in a tentative hug that tightened when I didn't resist. Thank you. I'd never have thought of it if it weren't for you. No more breaking up drunken brawls outside the arena. No more night shift. And no more cadavers, thank God. I rose and returned his hug. That's wonderful, Nathan. When I looked into his eyes now, I saw more than hope. I saw a sense of purpose that I'd never seen before. You're too good to be my housekeeper. It's something to do while I'm cooped up here. It's not like I can play the piano or the guitar, or go for a run. Daytime TV's awful on a good day. And it doesn't matter how many books you have in the house, I've never been a reader. I took a deep breath. Okay, but only do the groceries and cooking. And when you're healed up well enough to come with me, we'll head down south for the rest of our holiday. We'll take a day to go to the house where it all happened, and when the day is over, I'll put it up for sale. The rest of the time will be our own to have a proper holiday. Maybe you'll last before your course starts, because I've heard physio is almost as full on as medicine. That reminds me, you should be doing physio for that leg. Are you doing the exercises the hospital gave you? Nathan shifted his gaze so he didn't need to tell me he wasn't. I already knew anyway. I'll get you an appointment at the hospital physio. I want to see you well, Nathan, and if I have to drug you so you cooperate. I threatened. His hands flew up in surrender. All right, Dr. Miller. I'll do it. But you might need a crane to get me back up those stairs. 63. This time we agreed we'd do things differently. We'd go to the house first and all the memory-tainted places around it, and then, when we'd finished the difficult stuff, we'd get to be tourists. And when we got home, having banished every damn demon from our combined pasts, then we agreed that we'd finish what I started when I ripped her shirt. Caitlin plugged her MP3 player into the stereo and sang along quietly as we drove. I even found myself tapping my fingers on the steering wheel. This time would be different. No bunker meant the worst memories could be avoided. We'd go in, check the place out, go to the beach, and be back in Bustleton by dinner. I could almost taste the fish and chips already. And with all the physiotherapy she'd made me do the last couple of months, I'd be able to walk that jetty as if I'd never broken my leg. We passed the resort, and I nodded at the road to the beach. We could go to the beach first and then the house if you want. She shook her head firmly. No. First the house, then the beach. Checking out the house is more of a priority. We need to get it over with. I nodded and kept driving, for I knew she was right. By tonight, we'd have finally put those demons to rest, and the future would be brighter. I was certain of it. I wasn't counting on the roadblock. And not in the metaphorical sense either, big metal barriers across the whole damn road, blocking both lanes. The big letters proclaimed that the road was closed for a prescribed burn in the national park. "Ooh, that's good," Caitlin said. "With all the fire danger signs we saw last time we came down here, I wondered how the house would survive, so close to all that bush in the national park. If they're controlling it now, we won't have to worry about bushfires burning down the house in summer if we haven't sold it by then." "Sure, but it also means we can't get to the house today if the road's closed," I pointed out. "What do you want to do now?" She seemed stunned for a moment, but she recovered surprisingly quickly. "The beach road was still open, right? And we did see that track that ran from the house to the beach. So we park at the beach and walk up to the house." Her eyes burned with determination. There would be no getting out of this. I'd have to go inside that house of horrors one more time. At least Caitlin would be there to hold my hand. Shit, if anyone else knew how terrified I was of walking into a perfectly ordinary house. To stand in that kitchen and see the light switch which my hand had covered in her blood, but Caitlin understood. The only person who could. If she could do this, so could I. I negotiated a sloppy U-turn, leaving behind a spray of gravel as we sped in the opposite direction. The beach turnoff was only a kilometer or two up the road, so it was a few minutes before we bumped along the narrow road to the beach. Bitumen gave way to gravel as I pulled into the parking lot. Oh God, at least it was still daylight. I hadn't been here since the night Caitlin and I had been shot. When she'd taken a bullet for me and saved my life, and nearly lost her own. A sacrifice I didn't deserve. Not then and definitely not now. Warm fingers pulled mine from my death grip on the steering wheel. She squeezed my hand and gave me a shaky smile. "Is this the car park where the ambulance was?" Be a man. She deserved to know. I nodded as we exited the car, waiting until she stood beside me before pointing out the places that haunted my worst nightmares. I parked there, under that tree, so the car would be mostly hidden. The ambulance was there, on the sealed road, but the police cars were in the car park, here. I dragged my feet to where I fancied the gravel was a little darker than the rest. This is where we were shot. There was so much blood, I didn't know if I could stop it before you bled to death. Why did you do it? You were safe, the police, the ambulance guys, they were all there to save you. Why would you risk your life for one of the men who'd hurt you? You'd have been safer without me. No one was going to miss me. Nathan. It sounded like a warning. One of the cops was crooked, working with them, and the rest of them were still alive. Without you to protect me, I'd have died anyway. You'd promised to help me, and that made you important. And you never hurt me. Whatever else you did didn't matter anymore, because you were going to make things right. Not just atoning for whatever your sins were, but easing the pain of everyone else's too. You were a scapegoat. A saint. And my hero. I snorted. Some hero. Would you like to see where I dumped your body on the beach, almost gift-wrapping you for the bastard who almost killed you while I was looking for a first aid kit in my car? I strode toward the track, not waiting for a reply. Nathan, wait. I didn't. Oh, fine. But I want to take the beach gear with us. After I'm done with the house, I want to wash off every bit of dust and dirt in the water. I won't want to wait for you to get my stuff out of the car. She tugged at the boot of the car, but it wouldn't budge. Nathan. Open this damn car or I'll swim naked. For a moment I smiled, until I remembered where we were. I lifted the remote and lights flashed as the car unlocked for her. She hefted the heavy bag out of the boot and slammed the lid shut, shouldering her burden with fiery determination. Ah shit. I couldn't let her carry that, the gentleman buried deep inside me protested, and I crossed the car park to help her. I lifted the bag easily onto one shoulder and led the way to the beach. My pace didn't slow when I hit the sand, grinding it beneath my shoes as if I could turn it into finer powder, and obliterate the memories the grains held. I stopped when I was level with the bowed driftwood fence post that haunted my nightmares. Here. This is where your so-called hero left you to be raped one last time, when he'd promised to protect you. That's what you wanted to see, right? I glanced at Caitlin. Tears flooded down her face as she hugged her chest tightly. She didn't make a sound. Oh shit, I was a callous bastard. I wrapped my arms around her, willing her to cry into my shirt instead. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said that. A sob escaped, but I caught it before she buried her face in my chest to smother the rest. I felt her shaking and my heart sank further. Caitlin mumbled something and pushed me away. She sniffed fiercely and said, "This is where Mike raped me for the last time before he breathed his last. And it's where I first knew you'd never hurt me because you killed for me when I couldn't do it. You killed to protect me. That night you became my hero. Here on this sand." She dropped to her knees and stroked the white drifts left by the last tide, before lifting her sandy fingers to point to the spot I could identify as well as she did. There's where he stood until you shot him. He didn't believe you'd do it, but I knew better. I begged you to end it and you did. She rose. You think you're a coward, but you're wrong. You've just seen more than any man should and still you fight. Even when you're scared shitless. My mouth went dry and I couldn't answer. No. She was wrong, seeing good when there was nothing left. There was no heroism in seeking vengeance, just cold, congealing anger and emptiness inside. Caitlin grabbed my hand. Where's the track to the house? Show me. We have more demons to kill. And I can't do this alone. For all her fierce words, I could feel the terror trembling through her fingers. I nodded and led her along the ghostly sand. 64. I stopped beside the last track before the end of the beach. It must be this one. It's overgrown and it's a long time since I used it, but this has to be the way. It runs through the national park for a bit, then forks and you can go up to the house or deeper into the park. I trailed off and began again. I used to walk the beach at night. I'd go up to where Alanna's body was found and then come back, pacing up and down the beach. Sometimes for hours. Can you tell me where she was found? I mean, you said it was near the spot where you brought me. How much further along was she? The fear in Caitlin's eyes surprised me. Almost as if she didn't want an answer to her question. I died a little inside as I lifted my arm. Up that way, near the cafe. There's a good surf break there, right beside the resort. An early morning surfer found her and raised the alarm. It was too dark for him to see much, but he saw enough to call the police. Shit, I can't imagine the shock of finding a corpse where you least expect one to be. Let's try the track. If it's the wrong one, we'll come back and try the next one, Caitlin said calmly, and I found myself nodding, plodding along beside her. The breeze died as we entered the dunes, in an unearthly stillness that felt like it was waiting for something. We crested a slight rise and the air seemed to move again, bringing with it the smell of smoke as bushland burned. The easterly wind carried a hint of heat with it too, as if the fire wasn't far away, though the hot desert winds were rarely cool. Caitlin inhaled deeply, smiling as I stared. What? It's a prescribed burn. I'm sure the national parks people have this completely under control, and there's something amazing about the smell of Aussie hardwoods burning. It doesn't hurt them. Most Aussie trees come back bigger and stronger than ever before. And the heat makes them frisky. They go a bit nuts and release their seed after the fire. Talk about red-hot sex. The smoke grew thicker as we continued walking. How much further to the house? I nodded. Over that hill, and we should see it. I wanted to slow down, but Caitlin's pace only sped up. I want this over with, Nathan. The sooner we sort out this house, the sooner we can sell it. One more demon put to rest. How could I deny her the chance to banish a demon? To hell with my fears. What she wanted mattered more, and if she needed me, I'd be there for her. Always. 65. I reached the top of the hill and stopped dead. Oh shit. The trees on the ridge were towering orange torches. There was only a paddock full of stubble between them and the house, and the easterly wind to urge them on. Looks like the controlled burn's definitely not controlled anymore. We need to get to the beach and the safety of the water, Caitlin said urgently, unable to take her eyes off the orange wall rippling on the horizon. I shook my head, shouting to be heard over the roar of flames devouring everything in their path. It's too late. That wind's driving the fire straight toward the dunes. We'll never make it to the beach. There's nowhere to go. Caitlin turned on me. You mean we should just sit here and wait to be burned to death? You might be suicidal, Nathan, but there's no way in hell I'm going out without a fight. That forked track goes north into the national park. Maybe it'll take us to the next beach, or at least a clearing where we'll be safe. It's our best shot. No. Panic rose up in my throat, tasting of billa, but I swallowed it down. The other track goes to the bunker. The dark pit where you almost died. That's it. I swallowed. Angel, it's our only chance. Her eyes widened in fright. I don't have a torch. We'll be trapped down there in the dark, waiting for the fire to go past and die down. The whole place could collapse and we'd die there. No. There has to be another way, somewhere else. Her fingers gripped mine and she dragged me forward, heading back the way we'd come as sparks flew around us, heralding the firestorm behind. I was going to burn alive, and then I was going to burn in hell. Terrified, I ran with Caitlin, not daring to look behind. I could feel the heat pursuing us. A deep boom from the direction of the road was followed by an expanding ball of flame behind the house, raining shrapnel around. The sea mine had still been explosive after all. A flurry of flaming leaves flew past me, scorching my shirt until I slapped the smoldering cotton out. Caitlin screamed and I forgot my shirt. The remaining leaves had settled on her and her dress was on fire. I sprinted and slammed into her, throwing her to the ground. Stunned, she didn't even fight me as I rolled us across the ground to extinguish the flames. When they were out, I pulled her to her feet, but she sagged in my arms. Oh shit. Her eyes were closed. I must have knocked her out, or she'd passed out from the pain of her burns. I had to get her somewhere safe so I could see how badly she was hurt. Behind me, the wall of flame roared ever closer, cutting off my path to the house. If there was a house left behind that smoke. Trees crackled as the flaming leaves from previous casualties set them alight, before a grass tree flared up like a petrol-fueled bonfire. The bunker. Oh God, it was the only place left. If the fire didn't kill me, she would. Wake up, Caitlin, please. She didn't wake. Deja vu. For the second time, I carried her unconscious body down the track to the bunker, knowing that when she woke up, she'd be hurt and angry and I'd deserve to burn in hell for what she'd suffer. Better than both of us burning right now in the hell roaring toward us, though. My feet carried me down the steps of their own volition. I wouldn't save my own skin, but caring for Caitlin was automatic. I couldn't not do it. And I knew the bloody bunker could save us. When I reached the cool darkness at the bottom, I leaned against the wall, letting it take some of Caitlin's weight, as I yanked my phone out of my pocket and tapped the screen to give me some light. I needed a clear patch with no rubble where I could lie her down. Oh God, what I needed was the mattress that had been here while we were holding her captive. The one she stabbed when she should have stuck that blade into me. The room where they'd held her. There'd been a clear space there, surely, one I'd cleared the first time I set foot in there. I kicked broken bricks out of my way as I carried my precious burden into her former prison. The door lay on the ground now, where it couldn't shut her in. I laid her on that, figuring it was probably the cleanest place in the whole bunker, the only place that I knew hadn't drunk her blood or Alanna's. I shone my phone around, looking for a mattress or anything else suitable, but this room held only rocks and nightmares. There were others, though. Swallowing, I headed back into the main room that held the stairs to the surface. A shower of burning debris landed on the concrete steps, chasing the darkness away until it was extinguished as its fuel turned to ash. My eyes had caught a second doorway in the concrete wall, one I'd never seen before. Like I'd ever wanted to explore this place properly. I stumbled across the rubble-strewn floor and held up my phone to illuminate the mystery chamber. A pile of broken jarrah in the corner marked it as the twin to the sleeping quarters where I'd left Caitlin. And resting against the wall was a mattress. Ominous dark stains on it marked it as the same one I'd carried down here for her comfort before, and now it would help her again. Or at least I hoped it would. As I dragged it across the concrete, I scanned it for signs of mold or inhabitants. I didn't want her sleeping on a nest of venomous snakes. Caitlin's life had been poisoned enough by her experiences between these cursed walls. I wondered if there was any ammunition left over from the war, when this bunker had been built. Maybe a bomb or two to blast it into oblivion if we survived this, seeing as the sea mine was gone. So no one would ever suffer here as Caitlin had. Hell, if there were explosives hidden in the rubble and we didn't survive, maybe the fire would ignite them anyway, lighting a fitting pyre. No. Don't think of that. Caitlin had to survive. No matter what I'd done, she didn't deserve to burn. 66. Clenching my phone in my teeth, I lifted up her ruined dress to see the damage to the skin underneath. Would the flashbacks ever cease? Here I was, undressing her after knocking her unconscious. This time I'd done it by accident instead of tricking her into taking sleeping pills, but the similarities were just too numerous to name. I poured through the beach bag, praying she'd packed a first aid kit. Or anything I could use to help her, really. Shit, what I'd give for the first aid kit I kept in the car. I'd have killed to be able to run back and get it, just as I had that fateful night, but I couldn't leave her this time. Trapped by fire, I'd have to use what I had and hope we'd survive. I found a bottle of water and some towels. Better than nothing, I told myself, laying one towel on the mattress and leaving the other for later. The dress had to come off, along with her singed bra. Her knickers seemed to be fine, but I slid them off her too, so I wouldn't wet them when I poured the bottled water over her to wash away the soot and soothe her burns. I ripped a chunk of cloth from her dress and doused it with water, carefully cleaning away the dark patches on her skin as I examined her. Some places appeared an angry red, like a particularly bad sunburn, but the absence of blood and blisters gave me hope. Maybe I'd saved her in time. Next, I examined her head. Blood matted her hair and I cautiously probed her scalp, looking for the source of it. I found a lump which was oozing blood, but it had almost clotted already. She wasn't going to bleed to death, either. Her pulse and breathing were strong enough to reassure me that she was okay, for the moment. Until she woke up, of course, and tried to kill me for dragging her down here and stealing her clothes. Well, it wouldn't be the first time. At least I could make her comfortable. I poured the water over the pink patches of skin, hoping it would give her some relief, then shifted her onto the mattress so she could rest somewhere softer than the door that had kept her prisoner. I shrugged out of my shirt and folded it into the beach bag. She'd needed to cover herself if and when we left here, as all she had left was a pair of undies. Watching her, I debated whether to try going to find help, or even my first aid kit. It's not like it mattered if anything happened to me. But if I did get caught in the fire, no one would ever know Caitlin was here, needing help. And if she woke up in the dark alone? Shit, no. I settled down to watch her sleep, trying to keep my eyes on her face and not the beautiful body that had first tempted me all those years ago. Of all the times for my dick to consider resurrection. I swore and reached for the other beach towel, flicking it out of its neat folds until it covered her completely. There. Now I wasn't perving on the girl I couldn't have. As if to bolster my self-control, my phone emitted a warning beep that said the battery was dying. I should have charged it last night, but who'd have guessed I'd be using it as a torch in a bushfire today? Not me. I sighed as the faint phone light faded, leaving us in darkness. Now I couldn't even watch her. And if she woke up in the dark and thought she was alone, there'd be screaming for sure. I felt for her body, my fingers encountering the thick flannel of her beach towel coverlet. I tucked it around her and stretched out on the edge of the mattress, resting my arm on top of the towel. If she woke up, at least she'd know she wasn't alone. 67. Where are my clothes? Caitlin shrieked. I'll fucking kill you. She lurched to her feet, a hunched shadow staggering toward the doorway and the light outside. The inferno outside. No. I shouted, striding across the rubble to tackle her before she could walk to her death. She struggled in my grasp and I tightened my hold. There's a fire outside, remember? It's not safe. We have to stay here until it's burned out. I can't stay here in the dark, she whimpered. Turn some light on. Your phone. A torch. Something. I can't. I can't. Not in the dark. She slumped against me sobbing and I guided her back to the mattress. I didn't dare loosen my grip on her though. The battery died about an hour ago. There's no mobile access underground and all that trying to connect must have flattened it. Yours too. I checked. We just have to hold on until it's safe. Hold on to me. Don't you let go, Nathan. I'll go crazy in here alone. I need you close to me. As if to illustrate her point, she squirmed closer to me, pressing her face into my chest. Oh God, I felt her bare nipples harden against my chest, and that wasn't all that was hardening either. Shit, no. Of all the times to magically recover from impotence, this had to be the worst timing in the history of fucked up timing. Yes, she whispered. Her hands slid down my sides, dragging the waistband of my shorts with them. My shorts and my undies slid down to my knees, my dick rising from the dead like a zombie before swelling harder still against the soft skin of her belly. I groaned as her fingers stroked me, hesitantly at first and then firmly, decisively. Angel, no. We can't do this here. In the bunker where you nearly died, on a mattress stained with your blood, with a fire raging above that might still kill us. Sure we can. With death so close, how can you think about anything but sex? The way her hands were squeezing me, I couldn't think of anything else. She continued, make love to me, Nathan. Chase the terrors away and make me forget where we are, and I'll do the same for you. Stop overthinking this. I almost raped you here. In this room. I can't. I can't. I wailed. I was lying through my teeth. If her hands continued their delicate ministrations, I was going to explode. You wanted to sleep with me. That's normal, Nathan. You want to do it now, I can feel it. Another squeeze that made me moan. It's not rape if I'm willing. If I'm begging you for it, and I will. Please, Nathan. I shook my head. You don't beg. You're too strong and too proud to beg. Her lips touched my cheek. No one else maybe, but I'll beg and plead with you. When I lose to my own weakness, your strength shines through. It did then and it will now. Be my hero again, Nathan. Please. She wiggled against me, driving me mad. Drive every memory out of my head, so all I can think of is you, and what your body is doing to mine. And how I want more. She pushed me onto my back, her soft curves still pressed against me. And one was softer and hotter and wetter and... I moaned again as she eased my tip inside her, pushing slowly until she'd enfolded me completely in the one place I swore I'd never go. Angel, oh Angel. She tightened around me and let out a moan of her own. You don't know how long I've wanted to feel this. Make love to me, Nathan, please. Please. I need you. Her hips rocked and I thrust up to meet her. Once, twice, a third time. Each time she gasped and clenched around me. I wanted to see her face. I needed to know if she truly wanted this. I reached up for her breasts, caressing the soft swell of them until I encountered her rock-hard nipples. If I couldn't see them, I needed to taste them. Fastening my hands on her hips, I sat up with my neck thrust, angling deeper to her humming satisfaction. I ran the tip of my tongue over her breast, then sucked on her nipple. Caitlin gasped and I froze, wondering if I'd stuffed up and gone too far. Her fingers wove through my hair, pressing my face into her soft flesh. Don't stop, Nathan. Please do that again. I grinned and gave in. Those perfect globes had tempted me since the day I met her, and I fully intended to worship them properly. But for every stroke of my tongue, she was tightening around me, grinding her hips against mine until there was no way I'd last another minute. Unless I took charge. I tipped her back, wincing as I slipped out of her, but I didn't release her nipple until her head touched the mattress behind her. I knelt between her parted legs and sucked in a breath. Nathan. I heard the reproach in her tone, but I didn't pause to make excuses. If you want me to make you forget everything, from your surroundings to the past to your own damn name, I need to call the pace, or I won't last long enough. It's been a long time, Angel, and I need you to trust me. I stroked her damp thighs, tracing the wetness to its source. Her heat enveloped my fingers. What do you say, Angel? Yes. If you have to, then yes. She was breathless with desire. Caitlin. My Caitlin. I grinned into the dark unseen and caressed those smooth legs, lifting them over my shoulders so her bum lifted off the mattress. Closer, closer, I could feel the heat radiating off her and the smell of her was intoxicating. I wanted another taste. She cried out as my tongue slipped inside her, rasping over sensitive skin on the way in and out, and I paused again. More. Oh, please don't stop. I alternated between my fingers and my tongue, relying on the pitch of her cries to know how close I'd brought her to the precipice of pleasure. When her thighs tightened against my shoulders, I increased the pace, knowing I had her. This time she screamed my name for joy, not pain, before she begged for more. More that I delivered sooner than she'd expected, I thought, as her cries turned to moans that egged me on. I wanted to hear her scream my name again. That meant making her come harder, so hard she almost crushed my fingers as her core clenched. I laughed, pulling my fingers free with considerable effort. "What's your name again?" "Caitlin. Caitlin Lockyer. But you can call me whatever you want. Oh God, just don't stop." I plunged my tongue inside her, devouring her until she was too breathless to scream again. I wasn't much far behind her, either. "Tell me your name," I panted. "Caitlin. Angel. Alanna. Fuck, I don't know. I'm not sure if my body will hold together if you do that again. I think I might fall apart." "One more then," I breathed against her thigh, my fingers already stroking. "Nathan, oh Nathan, only if you promise me. Promise me." "What?" I asked, knowing I could keep her on edge with just my fingers, though I craved one more taste before we were done. Just in case it was the last. "Promise me that next time you'll come with me." She reached between my legs and squeezed. Oh God, not in her hands. Inside her. I needed to be inside her. I freed up my fingers, taking one last, languorous lick. I didn't want to wait, either. I'd wanted her from the minute I first saw her. She scrambled into my lap, a hot, wet dream come true. "Angel, oh God, Angel, Caitlin." I howled, unable to resist her, the magical minx who milked me for my last drop. 68. Is there anything more terrifying than waking in the pitch dark with someone's arm draped across you and not a scrap of clothing or covering between you? Maybe for normal people it wasn't frightening at all. My fear only lasted the few seconds it took to swallow my building scream, because I found my lifeline out of the dark when Nathan's sleepy voice mumbled, "Are you all right, Angel?" The hard, naked body was his, enfolding me in his arms. The ache between my thighs was his doing too, as my body reminded me what this man had done to me in the dark. I closed my eyes and breathed in his scent. Sweat and smoke and sex. I wanted all of it one more time before he left me, like he did every other girl, the morning after sex, or so his sister had said. If this was my last chance, then I wanted it again. That toe-curling, gut-wrenching, breath-stealing moment, when Nathan's mouth and hands and rock-hard muscles were my everything as I screamed his name for joy into the darkness. I couldn't see, but by God I sure could feel. One more round with him in the dark, and I'd never want to have sex with the lights on again. Heightened sensation as touch and smell and sound and taste. I ran my hands across his chest, then my tongue. The taste of salt lingered as I pressed closer to him, realizing that I wasn't the only one aroused by our intimacy. Goosebumps broke out on my back as the chilly morning air touched my skin. I shivered. "Angel? Are you all right?" His voice became more urgent. "I'm a little cold," I admitted, taking a deep breath before I told him what I wanted. Needed. "Nathan, I want you to make love to me again like you did last night. Light a fire in my blood and cover me with your body and kiss me." He peeled his body from mine and the cold turned my nipples to pink pearls. I wanted his mouth to warm them again before slipping lower, but the only contact between us was his fingers resting lightly on my hip. "Are you sure you're ready, Angel?" I grabbed his hand and dragged it between my legs, inhaling sharply when his fingers drove deep inside me, coaxing a whisper of desire into a roaring flame. "Yes," I whimpered as he pressed harder, tracing circles that spiraled around my nerve endings, drawing me deeper into a whirlpool of sensation that sucked the world away and left only us. "Oh yes," I shouted. God, why was he hesitating? I could feel the hot, hard length of him against my thigh, when I wanted him inside me. He was so hard I swore I could feel his beating pulse under my fingers as I tried to pull him in. "Angel," he moaned. "I'm no angel, Nathan," I replied, driving my hips forward to meet his powerful thrust. "But I'll ride you to heaven any time." 69. For the first time in longer than I could remember, I stayed awake willingly. All I wanted was to savor the sensation of this incredible woman in my arms, terrified that she'd vanish if I let go. That this would have been just another fucked-up dream. Caitlin's breath tickled my neck every time she exhaled, but I wouldn't have traded it for the world. I didn't dare move. Her even breathing ended in a gasp, then a moment of her holding her breath, as she ran her fingers lightly down my chest. "If you keep going, you'll find out I don't sleep in pajamas," I remarked, longing for her to take up the challenge. Another gasp and Caitlin snatched her hand back. The warm body at my side shifted so she wasn't touching me anymore. Over. It's over. But what a magic night it was, I told myself, even as I ached for more. "Where are my clothes?" she asked sharply. I shrugged, then realized she couldn't see me in the dark. "Your dress was burned, so some of it stayed outside, and what was left of it I threw in the corner somewhere. Your bra too. Your undies, I think I stuck them in your beach bag or next to it." "Beach bag?" I felt around for it and dumped it on her legs. This. It had towels and stuff in it. "And my bathers. Guess I'll be putting those on now." I heard rustling for several minutes until she said, "Okay. I'm decent. Is it safe to go outside? Is the fire gone?" "I don't know," I admitted. "I didn't want to leave you alone here to find out." She threw some fabric at my face. "Well, put something on so you can come investigate with me. I'm not leaving you here alone either." I pulled my shorts on and managed to clamber to my feet. I shouldered her bag, hoping we hadn't left anything important behind. "All right. I'm as decent as I'm going to get. Let's go see what hell looks like." I insisted on going first, seeing as I was way more expendable than she'd ever be. I stepped into daylight and couldn't stop staring. The world was completely leached of color, nothing but black, white and gray from the burned trees and ground to the ash covering everything. Wisps of smoke curled up from raised mounds that might once have been trees or bushes or God knew what, for I didn't and I wasn't game to find out. If it hadn't been for this godforsaken bunker, we'd have been 2 more smoking mounds. I dropped to my knees, thanking whatever powers in the universe that had let me live. Let us live, instead of burning to death as a prelude to eternity in hell. "Nathan! Is it safe to come up?" Caitlin called. I opened my eyes. "I think so. There's nothing left that can burn." Caitlin emerged and my breath caught in my throat. To hell with the burned landscape. Caitlin in a skimpy bikini was heaven itself, and she was walking toward me, stepping carefully in her thongs between the still warm piles of ash. She was the hottest thing I'd ever seen. She folded her arms across her chest. "I wish I still had my dress. I feel naked out here like this, and I can feel the heat from the ground on my bare skin." I held out my shirt hoping she wouldn't take it, but she did, quickly buttoning it over her bikini. "Looks like we won't be selling the house after all." I turned to see where Caitlin was pointing. It took me a moment to realize that the huge smoking pile of scorched sheet metal was what was left of the house. It had collapsed under the weight of its tin roof. I pulled her into an embrace, hugging her for the sheer joy of it. I'd never have to enter that house of horrors again because the inferno had claimed it. I was free. We were free. She pulled away far too quickly for my liking. "I guess insurance claim forms will be easier and there's still the land." Caitlin swiveled to face the ocean, though we couldn't see it from here. "Come for a swim with me before we go find out what happened to your car?" My car. Alanna's old car. Oh shit. I swallowed. Sure. I stumbled after her as she led the way to the beach. The fire had cleared a track broader than Bustle Highway, so it wasn't hard to find our way. When she reached the peak of the last dune, Caitlin gasped. I crossed the distance between us to stand at her side and found my mouth dropping open too. Behind us was nothing but devastation, yet the final slope down to the beach was untouched. When we reached the sand, none of the damage was visible, almost as if the fire and the disaster it had left in its wake had never happened. Caitlin pulled my shirt over her head and dropped it on the sand, wading into the water until it reached her waist. She ducked under a wave, rubbing handfuls of sand against her skin to scrub the soot off her, and probably the memory of my touch too. I strode in after her and followed her example. What I really wanted to do was pull her down onto the sand and make love to her like I had last night, like I wanted to every night of the rest of my life, but I wasn't willing to risk rejection again. She'd already pulled out of my embrace once this morning and the sun wasn't even properly up yet. I turned my back, trying not to think of her breathtaking body in the barely there bikini, and splashed myself with enough cold water to cool off an elephant. We should go back to the guest house for breakfast, a proper shower and some clean clothes, I said, starting toward the beach. Sure, she responded, and I heard her splashing steps behind me. 70. She didn't say another word to me the whole drive back in my miraculously untouched car. If it weren't for the smell of smoke in the air, I'd have begun to wonder if we'd imagined the fire, but I knew we hadn't. We parted in the passageway, each to our own separate rooms. I ached to join her in the shower, but I didn't dare offer. 5 minutes later, showered and dressed in fresh clothes, I pulled my door shut and set off for the kitchen. Behind me I heard Caitlin's soft footsteps. Impulsively, I turned to offer her my hand. I didn't think I'd ever get to eat breakfast again, let alone with you. It feels surreal, doesn't it? She laid her fingers cautiously on my palm, watching as I enfolded her hand in mine. Yes. It must be strange seeing a girl the next morning after what we did last night. If your sister was telling the truth, a first for you, I think. I hope you don't mind. I can have breakfast at a different time tomorrow if you like. She lowered her eyes as she trudged down the passage, pulling her hand free. I stopped to untangle the confusion in my head. What in hell had my sister said to her? Oh. It clicked and I laughed. Angel, I'll join you for breakfast every day for the rest of your life if you'll let me. It was her turn to stop. But you don't. Just because I've never slept with a girl more than once, you think I'm going to leave you? None of the other girls were you, Angel. I waited 5 years for last night. And tonight, I want to do it all over again, but in a proper bed, like you deserve. You seriously think that after one night with you, I wouldn't want more? I lowered my voice. Angel, tonight I'll be the one begging. Her eyes widened as if she didn't believe me. Still chuckling, I headed for the kitchen and the smell of coffee. Good morning. Beth looked like she'd had way more sleep than Caitlin and me, judging by her cheerful smile. I mumbled a response and heard Caitlin do the same. Have you heard about the fire? Beth continued, setting out bowls of yogurt and fruit. I pushed the bowl of strawberries across the table to Caitlin, knowing they were her favorite. A routine burn-off in the national park got out of hand and burned through half the houses in Osprey Bay, up near the resort. Then the wind changed and they had to close off all the roads as it burned out of control in the national park. They're flying in firefighters from the eastern states and will be full by tonight. I've had to turn some down already and I haven't even checked my email this morning. She laughed, shaking her head. They say no one's been hurt, thank goodness, but they aren't letting anyone back in yet, so no one's checked the houses that burned. No, we hadn't heard, I managed to say through a mouthful of toast. We went for an early swim this morning. Haven't had time to check the news. Caitlin's eyes were firmly fixed on the bowl of strawberries and yogurt in front of her. We could share a room if you need it for firefighters, I added quickly, trying not to grin when Caitlin's surprised gaze turned to me. Just make up the sofa bed for me. Caitlin swallowed. That won't be necessary. We should probably head home early anyway. If the place is full of firefighters, we'd probably get more rest and quiet at home. I opened my mouth to protest, but Caitlin's wink made me close it again. Her foot stroked my thigh under the table, awakening some other muscles in anticipation of further stroking. Fortunately, Beth had missed the exchange. If you're sure. You have paid for both rooms for a week. I'll refund your money, of course. Of course, I said smoothly. The sooner we get that fire under control, the better, right, Angel? I felt her foot slide out of my aching lap. Caitlin slipped another spoonful of yogurt into her mouth and nodded. 71. Let me see how your burns are healing, I suggested. Caitlin shrugged and pulled her shirt over her head before stretching out face down on the couch. Aside from the scars on her back from 5 years ago, I couldn't see any sign of damage. I leaned over to kiss the back of her neck. Beautiful. You're not going to scar at all. She glanced over her shoulder. You know there are easier ways to get me to take my top off. Just ask Nathan. I opened my mouth to ask for more than that, but something on TV caught my attention. Residents of Osprey Bay are allowed back for the first time today. Scenes of heartbreak and devastation as some homes were completely lost, the news anchor said. On the screen were pictures of the burned-out houses. It looked like Laura's house had copped the worst of it, so that picture featured the most from varying angles. Caitlin's phone rang and I leaned across her to snag it from the table so I could hand it to her. Hello, yes, I'm Dr. Miller, the owner of 100 Osprey Bay Drive. She listened for almost a minute, nodding slowly before she replied, Sure, I can tell you my policy number. She rattled off the number as if she'd memorized it. Several more minutes of occasional yes, mmHmm and sure responses, she thanked them and ended the call. The phone clattered to the coffee table as she turned her puzzled expression on me. Apparently, there are some issues with the local council and the National Parks Office over who was responsible for the fire, so the insurance company wanted to explain the delays. The odd thing is that they've sent in a demolition crew, but the council aren't allowing them on the site because of all sorts of things. First they said hazardous materials and asbestos, and now there's some question as to whether the land's safe because of caves beneath it. Apparently a section of ground collapsed under a truck. The whole area's been declared unsafe until a specialist team has come to assess it, so demolition will be delayed until then. She grabbed her t-shirt and yanked it back on. Does that mean you can't sell it? I asked. Well, not yet, seeing as there's a burned-out house on it, but there aren't any caves there. The whole property's sand, the limestone doesn't start until the other side of the road where that ridge is. If there's anything unsafe underground, it's got to be crater where the mine blew up or the bunker. And if a truck's driven over it and the roof's collapsed, why would they say it's a cave? They're old defense ruins, so maybe defense is checking it out for more explosives. Or it could be ASIO, given the history of the place. I began thoughtfully. Either way, it's a secret they want to hide. Maybe even bury. You know, I hope they do bury it. Caitlin laughed. So it really is over. The fire took out the house, the demolition crew destroyed the bunker, and ASIO or defense will cover up the whole mess and bury the past for us. But if that bunker hadn't been there, if you hadn't known where it was, it's a miracle we survived. It's over. I can't believe how relieved I feel. It's wonderful. She grabbed me in a tight hug, which I was only too happy to return. Shall we have a drink to celebrate? I asked. She grinned. Absolutely. I'll get a couple of beers and we can watch the sunset from the balcony. We settled down to drink. Caitlin sighed contentedly and said, "You know, if you'd agreed to enter the witness protection program with me 5 years ago, we could have been sharing beers on my balcony in Melbourne all this time." I snorted. No one ever offered me witness protection. I evidently wasn't worth protecting. I stared at her. "But if you'd wanted me to come with you, all you'd have had to do is say so. I would have dropped everything for you." Caitlin's mouth hung open. "But Mott, he was supposed to tell you. To arrange for a transfer to Melbourne to be with me. That's what you came to the church to say. That you were sorry because you couldn't accept the offer." I shook my head slowly. Mott didn't offer me a damn thing. He fired my ass and took my gun off me the day before we went to the morgue to identify the bodies of your kidnappers. The only transfer I got was to the unemployment list. She took a deep draught of her beer and was silent for a while. Conscious of having killed the conversation, I began babbling about the weather. 2 beers turned into 4 and the sun was almost out of sight when we waited for the first star to appear so we could make a wish. "I wish," we both began before laughing. "You first," I offered, wondering what she looked so eager to wish for. "No, you," she replied, reddening. "Ladies first," I insisted. I didn't want to admit that I couldn't decide on just one wish. Caitlin got up. "I have an idea. I'll be back." She crossed to the sliding door and reached into her apartment. From the table beside the door, she took a notepad and 2 pens. Returning to the tiny table beside me, she tore off a page and handed me a pen. "How about we write them down?" "Sure," I said, clicking my pen in readiness. I stared at the paper. I had too many wishes that I knew could never come true. So much of the past I wish I could change. To write down only one. Caitlin's pen skidded across the page until she threw it down. "Aren't you done yet?" she asked. I covered my page with one hand. "It's hard to think which wish is most important," I admitted. She folded her page in half, leaving it on the table. "Well, I'll go take the empties inside and get a couple more, shall I? While you're still thinking." She grabbed the empty beer bottles in the crook of her arm and slid the door open. I heard the glass clink into the bin. Still I stared at my blank page. I glanced over at her crisply folded sheet. I reached over and snagged it, as curiosity got the better of me. "I wish I'd told you I loved you 5 years ago." Instead of helping, those simple words shot a hole through my heart. If I'd known she'd felt that way 5 years ago, I'd have stopped at nothing to keep her. Another wish joined the clamor in my head. I stared at my paper. I wanted to wish that the painful events in our past had never happened. I wanted Alanna to be here, to introduce the 2 of us. I wanted Caitlin and me to fall in love like 2 normal people in one of the romance novels Chris read when I wasn't around. To live happily ever after. Not any of this. I wanted to take another deep draught of my beer, but it was empty and Caitlin hadn't returned. What was taking her so long? I glanced inside but I didn't see her, so I stepped back into her apartment. I headed for the fridge and got out 2 more beers, the last of our 6-pack. I started searching through the drawers for her bottle opener. Maybe she'd gone to the toilet, I reasoned. I figured she'd be back soon enough, and I'd have her drink ready and waiting. I heard a sob, unmistakably hers. I looked around, trying to find the source. She sat hunched over the dining table, her dark hair blending with the dark cloth as she rested her head on her folded arms. Her shoulders shook with another sob. "Angel, are you hurt?" I asked as I cautiously approached her. "No," she whispered without lifting her head. She hunched her shoulders over, as if protecting herself from me or the rest of the world. "All this time I thought you'd chosen your job over me. That you rejected my offer because you didn't want me. Shit, if that bastard Mott wasn't dead, I'd want to kill him twice over. and bring him back to life to do it a third time. If I hadn't been so trusting, if I'd asked you, I wish I could go back 5 years and do everything differently." She started to sob. I couldn't stand to see her like this. I laid careful hands on her shoulders and started to rub them. Gentle strokes, just like I'd learned in that massage course with Alanna so many years ago, easing away the tension until I felt her start to relax. "I read your paper," I confessed. I felt her shoulders tighten, but I kept up my massage until she dropped them again. "I have so many wishes about the past, about things I can't change," I continued. "I'd like to wish that they'd never seen you, or that they'd never seen my sister. Or my parents had never annoyed so many people. I'd like to wish we'd met under different circumstances, so I'd have had a chance with you. I can wish for all those things and never get any of them. Or I can make a wish for the future and do my damnedest to make sure it comes true." I leaned over and touched my lips to the back of her neck. "I wish you'd let me carry you off to bed, right now, and make love to you all night. I'd like to kiss you, caress you, taste you and feel you wrapped around me in every way you're willing to be. I'd like to hear you scream my name the way you did the last time you let me pleasure you, as if you want me and you want more. When we're both so satisfied and exhausted by such an incredible night, I'd like to hold your naked body in my arms and sleep beside you until morning. When we wake together, I'd like our first thought to be how much we'd like to do it all again, even if it's not straight away, but some vague time in the future." She sat still and silent. Now I'd started, I wanted to say it all, so I told her the rest. "I know I don't deserve you, but I wish I could have you, for a night, or for a week, or forever. If I could wipe all the horror of the past away I would, but I'd still want my one wish. I love you, Angel, just like I did then. More maybe, because I know how amazing you really are, taking the broken pieces and making a man out of me again." I closed my eyes. I heard the scrape of her chair across the tiles and I felt the leg crush my toe, but my pain and protest died as her mouth fastened over mine. Salty with tears, the taste of her tongue on mine drove me mad. I lifted her off her feet, cradling her in my arms, desperate to prolong that passionate kiss. She broke for breath, but I just wanted to savor the feeling. "What will you do if I agree to grant your wish?" she asked breathlessly. I laughed. "I'll give you the best night I can manage, all of it. Just say the word, Angel." "And if I want more than one night? Every night afterwards?" "Then I'm yours for as long as you want me. A night, a month, a year, a lifetime. I owe you my life and I want to give it to you, one glorious day and night at a time. Do you want me, Angel?" "Yes," she murmured, kissing me again. "Yes, Nathan. You're my hero and you always will be." This has been Afterlife of Alanna Miller. Book 3 in the Nightmares Trilogy. Written by Demelza Carlton. Autonarrated by AI Charlotte from Google.